Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has said in a speech after Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip that it was not an end to occupation. He demanded Israel withdraw from the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Earlier in the day, Palestinian Prime Minister Ahmed Qrea echoed Abbas' demand, saying Gaza was the first step to evacuation from all Palestinian territories. Qrea told reporters during a tour of the former Gaza settlements that after the occupation had gone, Israel's control over the sea, the border crossings and the sky had to be removed. He said the Palestinians would press for ending the occupation in the West Bank to establish their independent state. Qrea met senior members of the Mawasi, a Palestinian community which lived inside the Gush Katif settlement block under Israeli occupation. Palestinian forces took over after Israel completed its withdrawal from the Gaza Strip yesterday. Palestinian police blocked off the abandoned settlements and chased scavengers in a first attempt to impose order after celebrations of Israel's pullout. Meanwhile, the Palestinian National Authority is holding contacts with the Egyptians on operating the Rafah border crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. Egyptian guards failed for a second straight day to control a rush across the Gaza-Egypt border. Overshadowed by the completion of a smooth pullout from the Gaza Strip, Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon departed for New York to address the United Nations General Assembly. Sharon and Israeli Foreign Minister Silvan Shalom are due to hold a series of meetings with world leaders who are expected to embrace the Israeli leader for the withdrawal. Palestinian leaders, while welcoming any pullout from occupied land, remain skeptical of Sharon's, particularly due to his insistence that Israel will keep large settlement blocks in the occupied West Bank under any future peace deal. Also in New York, members of the Quartet Committee are to meet on September the 20th to discuss the next stage in the Palestinian lands. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, who hailed the Israeli withdrawal, said the committee will meet on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The largest gathering of world leaders is about to get underway at the United Nations in New York as they meet for 3 days of talks on poverty and reform of the 60-year-old institution itself. The 2005 World Summit is expected to bring together 175 heads of state and government. They will be reviewing the so-called Millennium Development Goals, which were laid out in 2000 and aim to cut extreme poverty by half, ensuring primary education and stemming the AIDS pandemic by 2015. Leaders will also be taking a long, hard look at not only what the United Nations does, but how it goes about its work.
Reform of the United Nations is much more than reform of the Security Council. It's reform of the Secretariat, reform of the way we deliver service, what the UN does out there in third countries. And above all, it's reform of policies. How we reform development, human rights, security, stopping conflict. All those things are massively on the table, and I'm quite confident will be delivered in the summit outcome. Now, on Security Council reform, the problem has been that there wasn't sufficient agreement.
Making the UN stronger in terms of its management. As we've seen from the oil for food scandals and other recent problems that the UN is facing, the United States government wants to see the UN become more accountable, more efficient, and more transparent.
Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad will attempt to avert referral of Tehran's nuclear case to the UN Security Council during the UN General Assembly. The new president, who left for his first trip to the U.S., has promised to deliver a new proposal in New York to break the stalemate in Iran's atomic standoff with the West. In a message addressed to the Iranian people before his departure, Ahmadinejad said Iran would defend its legitimate rights during the meeting. He added that he would use one of his speeches to stress that all nations should be allowed to use different kinds of energies, including nuclear energy. Also today, the exiled National Council of Resistance of Iran, or the NCRI, released what it said was new and secret information about Iran's suspected nuclear program during a news conference in Brussels. NCRI spokesman Ali Safavi said Iran was investing in technology to build 5,000 centrifuge machines needed to develop their suspected nuclear weapons program.
To smuggle engines. Upon information that the National Council has been able to ascertain, of the 5,000 centrifuges that the regime is planning to build and manufacture, some 2/3 have already been manufactured and tested, and they're ready to be installed. The Tehran has, in the past 2 years, managed to smuggle engines for the centrifuges from China through Dubai to Tehran.
In Washington, Iraqi President Jalal Talibani said Iraq will not set a timetable for a withdrawal of U.S. troops. He backed away from his published remarks that the United States could withdraw as many as 50,000 troops by the end of the year. Talibani, speaking at a joint news conference with President George W. Bush, said, however, he hoped that by the end of 2006, Iraqi security forces would be strong enough to start taking over from U.S. troops. Bush, facing waning support at home for the war in Iraq, rejected the notion of setting of timetable for a withdrawal, saying only that as Iraqi security forces assume more control, U.S. forces can stand down. Bush put more pressure on Syria, saying it should do more to stop armed militants crossing into Iraq to carry out suicide bombings.
President, thank you for your leadership. The ambassador did speak strongly about Syria, because he understands that the Syrian government can do a lot more to prevent the flow of foreign fighters into Iraq. These people are coming from Syria into Iraq and killing a lot of innocent people. They're trying to kill our folks as well. And so, of course, he's speaking strongly about that. And the Syrian leader must understand we take his lack of action seriously. And the government is going to become more and more isolated as a result of two things. One, not being cooperative with the Iraqi government in terms of securing Iraq, and two, not being fully transparent about what they did in Lebanon.
Of the UN inquiry into former Lebanese Prime Minister Hariri's murder agreed Monday with Syria's foreign ministry on the format of questioning Syrian officials, but that Melis left Damascus without questioning Syrian witnesses. A local official said the Melis was due back to Syria by the end of next week. As Melis returned from Syria, the UN Security Council granted him 40 extra days to finish his investigation. Melis has now until October 25th to complete his probe. A Syrian official told Reuters after a meeting with Detlef Melis and a Syrian Foreign Ministry legal advisor, Riyad al-Dawoodi, an agreement has been reached on the procedures and arrangements for hearing Syrian witnesses. Melis later returned to Lebanon, but the official said, without elaborating, that he would return to Damascus towards the end of next week. Melis, probing the February assassination of slain Premier Hariri in Beirut, had arrived in Syria earlier on Monday, starting a sensitive phase of the investigation, which some Lebanese media say could implicate some Syrians. Damascus denies Lebanese allegations of Syrian links to the killing. It agreed to the visit by the German prosecutor after international accusations that it was not cooperating with the probe, which began in mid-June. A Syrian source close to the talks in Damascus said Melis wanted to interview at least 8 Syrian officials, including top officers who were serving in Lebanon at the time of the murder, and other senior figures. Lebanese media reported the number of officials ranged between 9 and 12. This Syrian source said the Syrian authorities might ask for judges from Saudi Arabia and Egypt to examine evidence that showed the interviews were necessary for the investigation and might ask them to attend the questioning of witnesses in Syria. Melis's movement in Damascus were shrouded in secrecy and conducted amid heavy security. But an official source said he held a long meeting with Dawoodi. Melis's long-awaited visit to Syria followed an apparent breakthrough earlier this month in the probe. Lebanon charged 4 pro-Syrian generals with planning the assassination after Melis recommended their arrest. Lebanese political sources say Melis has strong evidence against the 4, including telephone records and statements from witnesses, including one super witness. They said they expected more arrests in Beirut soon in the widening probe into the financing and execution of the murder. Melis has not yet revealed what evidence he has, but is due to report his findings to the Security Council in late October. Officials in Syria Melis expects to interview include the top officers in Lebanon at the time of the attack, intelligence chief Rustam Ghazali, and top aides Mohammed Khallouf and Jamia Jamir. The 4 arrested generals in Beirut had close links to Ghazali and his aides, as well as Lebanese President Emil Lahoud.
To
the capital of Syria, where Devlis Melis, the head of the International Investigation Committee into the assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, has left. He left Syria with the intent to return at the end of next week. Melis left with an agreement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs legal advisor Riyad al-Dawoodi on the protocols to hear Syrian witnesses regarding the assassination of Lebanese Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri. Syria confirmed that it will cooperate with the International Investigation Committee and will offer all possible accommodations to it because learning the truth about who killed Hariri is in Syria's interests. Everyone is anticipating the results of the meeting to be held at the end of next week, which Syria agreed to during the visit to Damascus by Devlet Melis, the head of the International Investigation Committee. During this brief visit, Melis met with Riyad Dawood, the legal advisor in the Foreign Ministry. They agreed to detailed measures that will be taken by the Investigation Committee, in addition to legal reforms for the investigators to comply with Syrian law.
It is certain that the first visit by Detlef Melis achieved its main objective of securing an agreement on the protocols that will deal with the accusations. If there are accusations by the International Committee against Syrian officials, what are the judicial protocols and procedures will be used to conduct the investigation, and who will make the judgments? No doubt, Syria will sign protocols similar to those between Lebanon and the United Nations and lay down detailed procedures based on the principle that recognizes the state's authority to be the party to judge its own citizens. That is, if accusations are made against Syrian officials.
تضع أو أن تكون هي الجهة التي تقوم بمحاكمة أفرادها هذا في حال قدمت أي اتهامات أو وجهت أي اتهامات.
The visit was tainted by an atmosphere of caution and suspicion that the committee has become politicized and has exceeded the normal and legal framework in the interests of a greater campaign that aims to undermine Syria's role in the region and weaken it. Despite all this, Syria again confirmed that it agreed to allow some Syrians to cooperate in full with the committee.
Syria confirmed that it will cooperate with the International Investigation Committee. Since the crime took place until now, Syria has never said that it will not cooperate with the Investigation Committee. Rather, it confirmed that it will offer all its accommodations to help Detlef Melis International Committee succeed. However, what worries Syria is that this committee will be used as a means to place pressure on it. It will be used as a political tool instead of a legal or just investigation. This is what really worries Syria. If there is a legal structure for the investigation, for sure Syria will provide all it can to get the truth out.
What is strange, according to monitors here, is the premeditated scenarios that were put in place prior to this visit and which opens the door to many possibilities. Despite all the complication and confusion surrounding Detlef Melis's visit to Damascus, the positive Syrian response is an encouraging indication that there is confidence in achieving the necessary cooperation in order to reach the truth. Farah Shaheen, Nile News TV, Damascus. According to an Iraqi police source, a roadside bomb targeting a U.S. armored vehicle exploded, killing 4 Americans south of al-Basra. The American-occupied forces and the Iraqi security forces launched a joint offensive operation in the town of Haditha, northwest of Baghdad. A military source confirmed that 1 person believed to be an al-Qaeda member was arrested and 4 others were killed. The occupied forces used helicopter gunships in their operation. Many houses were also destroyed.
A roadside bomb targeting an American military armored vehicle exploded south of al-Basra near Baghdad. The town of al-Basra is known to be relatively peaceful. According to an Iraqi police source, the explosion killed a number of Americans. An American army source confirmed that no military or diplomatic personnel were on board of the vehicle. This is the 3rd explosion in al-Basra. 4 Americans and 3 British were killed in other random incidents last week. The Iraqi and the American occupation forces launched a fierce attack in the town of Tal al-Afar, north of Iraq. Iraqi military sources confirmed that they will expand their operations against armed groups west of Iraq. In a joint operation, a similar attack was launched in the town of Haditha, where 1 person believed to be an al-Qaeda member was arrested. According to an American army source, the United States military forces used helicopter gunships in the operation, claiming that they have killed 4 al-Qaeda members in the town of Haditha. An Iraqi military source confirmed that the attack destroyed many houses and civilian buildings.
The attack was very fierce, where helicopter gunships pounded the town of Haditha. The attack destroyed many houses and cars that were burned to the ground.
The Haditha operation came as the American occupation forces concluded a similar attack in the town of Tal al-Afar, where they claimed to have full control of the city. The Iraqi Prime Minister Ibrahim al-Jafari toured the area and talked with Iraqi forces in the town of Tal al-Afar. During the Tal al-Afar operation, 200 armed men were killed, 160 others were arrested, including 21 armed leaders. Moreover, the military forces discovered training centers and 24 warehouses used to store weapons.
Shockwaves throughout the country's military establishment and elsewhere today after Major General Daron Al-Morg, former head of the IDF's Southern Command, landed in London aboard an El Al plane for a fundraising trip for a centre for the severely handicapped here in Israel, but was advised not to disembark and to return to Ben Gurion Airport. Major General Al-Morg is facing a criminal investigation in Britain over his involvement in the targeted killing of Hamas terror leader Salah Shadeh in July 2002. 14 Palestinians, most of them children, were killed when an Air Force plane dropped a 1-ton bomb on Shadeh's home in Gaza. A short time ago, IBA's Efrat Batat spoke with Major General Al-Morg about his ordeal.
First of all, it's very, very embarrassing to know that you cannot arrive, you cannot touch the land of England, you cannot visit Jewish communities, and about 20 meetings were arranged, especially for me, with fundraiser for my life project for this village in Birmingham, in Leicester, and London. Some in synagogue, some halls, some private events.
So you don't know when you'll be back in Britain in the near future?
Right now, I don't know, and hopefully, the all legal envelope will be changed by democracies, by United States, by Israel, by Britain. It's a huge paradox, extremely paradox that I, as a fighter against terrorism, as also a fighter for human rights, as someone who is the mouthpiece for the weakest in our society, for brain damaged children that are unable to speak for themselves. I find myself in conditional position.
On a broader note, if you may, tell us what you think the implications of such lawsuits, such moves that are being taken against former generals in the IDF. Will this affect future military operations?
Of course, it was written today in the newspaper, so they might suffer from the same problem.
But do you think this will have an effect on how the army will operate in the future?
It's not the army. It's not the army. The state of Israel must take some actions, must lead a campaign for Israel soldiers, for Israel generals. It doesn't matter. They just pick me up since I'm a general, but the same, they could pick up a soldier.
But the allegations were against the targeted killing of Saleh Sheikhaida in 2002.
One of them. They pick up 3 allegations. One of them is Saleh Sheikhaida. This was not an operation under my responsibility. As a matter of fact, that was under the responsibility of Chief of Staff and then Chief of Air Force. But it doesn't matter. They just wanted to symbolize, maybe to terrify Israeli officers, Israeli generals, and stuck them in Israel and create a new siege.
Do you think maybe this is an attempt to draw public attention from the disengagement and maybe the growing chaos inside the Palestinian Authority?
I don't know if there is some macro strategic plan against Israeli general to attract public attention to Britain, but of course, for sure, this is a new campaign, a very sophisticated campaign, and totally unjust campaign against Israelis, against the Israeli soldiers, Israeli generals, Israeli politicians. It's part of anti-Semitism, and Israeli should stand tall and fight and when plan how to face it.
دقت هجمات يوليو الماضي في أنفاق مترو لندن أكثر من ناقوس خطر.
In the aftermath of the subway and bus attacks in London, Muslims in Britain are living in fear and isolation. The so-called war on terrorism is haunting Muslims in the streets of London. They are targeted because they are simply Muslims. In the eyes of the British government, they are all terrorists until proven otherwise.
حتى يثبتوا العكس.
إنها محطة إجوال رود لقطار الأنفاق التي استهدفها أحد الانتحاريين.
This is the Edgware Road underground metro train station where a suicide bomber detonated explosives on July 7th. Many Arabs who live near the station use the route to travel from one part of the city to another. After the London bombings attacks, Muslims fear the backlash of discrimination and racism like Arab Americans after September 11.
في أعقاب أحداث 11 من سبتمبر.
نتيجة القوانين هاي صار في ضغوطات ما لها علاقة.
The British government implemented new laws targeting Muslims in general. Most of them do not have any association or connection with any terror organization. Muslims are facing difficulties and hardships in their daily lives. They have to present documents proving their citizenship when they deal with any governmental agency or even when they visit a financial institution such as a bank.
لا أحد ينكر في هذه الأثناء الحجم المخيف.
Prime Minister Tony Blair had launched a counter-terrorism campaign vowing to expel any person who incites or harbors suspected terrorists. They would be deported even if they are British citizens. The war on terrorism campaign in London has negative impacts on law-abiding Muslims. The English government has a long list of people who are allegedly charged with terrorism. They are being prosecuted behind closed doors. The Human Rights Organization of Liberty speculates a dim future for Arabs and Muslims in Britain.
The idea that we might
deport people to countries that have a history of human rights violations is baseless. We will not expel people to a place where they might be tortured or humiliated. Such an idea contradicts the principles and beliefs that the United Kingdom is built on. We believe in religious tolerance and freedom of speech.
The Human Rights Organization of Liberty cautioned the British government not to violate civil liberties and rights of individuals during their crackdown on Muslims in the fight against terrorism.
We now go through strict screening as we travel. The British police use racial profiling. If you have the Arab or Muslim appearance, the British will stop you, even if you are a British citizen. I am a British-born Arab, thank God, and the police still stops and searches me at all times.
Most Muslims agree that London will not take drastic and collective punishment measures against Arabs to avoid portraying a negative image in the world. However, Muslim critics believe that the British government has lots of avenues to crack down on Arabs behind the scene. Muslims and Arabs are also facing discrimination and stereotyping in the workforce. For example, they are being replaced by cheap laborers from Eastern Europe. As the government implements stricter security measures in its war on terror, Muslims' fear of discrimination and racism increases. They believe that the government will continue to point the fingers at them. Madar Program, Abu Dhabi Channel, Kamal Al-Wani, London.
إلى الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية شرطة نيو أورليانز تجلي.
In the U.S., the New Orleans police have been forcefully evacuating people from their homes in the city that was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell has added his voice to the two-thirds of Americans who are dissatisfied with the performance of the Bush administration during this catastrophe. We leave you with Tarek Haji.
The American president was far from Louisiana when Hurricane Katrina hit, but his political image was probably damaged the most. Not only did Hurricane Katrina destroy New Orleans, but it also decreased Bush's popularity to a new low of 40%. According to a recent poll survey, two-thirds of those who were surveyed said that they were confident that Bush would have dealt with the situation differently had the victims been white. Meanwhile, the African-American former Secretary of State Colin Powell added his voice to those who are dissatisfied with the performance of the Bush administration, saying that he was shocked by the fact that the aid and rescue efforts were extremely slow. An additional amount of $51.8 billion was approved, bringing the total aid to $62.3 billion. Since many New Orleans residents refused to leave the city, the American administration forcefully evacuated them from their homes, fearing that disease may spread due to the many decomposing corpses. During an inspection visit to the afflicted areas in the Gulf of Mexico, Vice President Dick Cheney said that the administration will manage despite the problems that have been hindering the rescue efforts. Dick Cheney's visit comes following Bill Clinton and George Bush Sr.'s visit in an attempt to boost the rescue efforts, not only towards the victims, but also of the Bush administration's political image.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.